Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2022 Ford Escape, we're going to be showing you how to install the Demco Air Force One supplemental braking system. And this will work with the motorhomes that have the factory equipped BrakeSync. But before we get into that, why don't we just take a minute, check this out, and make sure it's going to work for you. So right off the bat, what a supplemental braking system is going to do is apply the brakes in your towed vehicle whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome. And that's just going to, help bring you to a more predictable and complete stop. So when it comes to this particular kit, it's pretty cool. This is designed to work with the motorhomes that have the BrakeSync right from the factory. And what some manufacturers are doing are putting parts on the motorhome right from the factory that are designed to work with the Air Force One braking system. So it's pretty cool. You have the confidence knowing that what you have on the motorhome is designed to work with this system, and it'll pair up nicely together and operate like it should. On the motorhome, this is what our factory BrakeSync connector looks like, and it's going to allow you to take your air hose that goes to the front of your vehicle and plug into it, and that's where the braking system is going to receive the air pressure. So this kit is designed for the Freightliner chassis. I believe there's a kit available for Tiffin chassis as well. I think really the only difference is the type of connector there. I could be wrong, but pretty sure that's the only difference. So regardless of what one you have, there's going to be a kit available for you. The kit is going to come with everything you need to set up your vehicle side. And I want to mention, if your motorhome does not have that BrakeSync from the factory, not really a huge deal. There's another kit available that comes with the motorhome parts that you need to get everything to work together. But with that in mind, why don't we just kind of check a few things out and show you how the kit actually works. One of the cool things about this kit is the fact that it's proportional. So your motorhome and your vehicle are going to stop in unison, if that makes sense. One's not going to fight each other. More or less what that means is however hard you hit the brakes in your coach, the towed vehicle is going to do the same thing. So for example, if you're rolling up to a stop sign, let's say, and you're halfway on the brakes, the towed vehicle is going to do the same thing. On the other hand, if you're going down the highway, maybe there's an accident ahead and have to come to an emergency stop and really stand on that brake pedal, the towed vehicle's going to match that. So it just makes for a smoother experience. This particular kit's also going to come with the wireless coach link monitor, which is pretty cool. It plugs into a 12-volt outlet there, and this is going to be a great way to monitor if the brakes and system are operating in your towed vehicle. So there's some indicator lights here, and obviously when they're not on, the brake pedal's not being pushed down. But whenever you hit the brakes, you'll see them light up, and that's a quick way to know that everything is working back there. So if you run into any issues, you're hitting your pedal, these aren't coming on, you know something's up, or if these won't turn off, that's going to let you know that you need to look into that. Inside of here as well, there's also a buzzer that'll make an audible noise if you're on the brakes for an extended period of time, right? So if the brakes are stuck or whatever, this will start beeping at you, letting you know something's going on. But that could get annoying. Say let's say if you're in traffic or something and you're on the brake pedal pretty much the whole time, you're not going to want to listen to that buzzing and going crazy. So thankfully there's a switch back here. You can turn that off and disable it in that situation, but I do suggest once you get back out on the open road, turn that back on just to be on the safe side. Other than that, at the end of the day, it's a nice setup. And if your motorhome has that BrakeSync, to me, it would be silly to use anything other than what they recommend. It's designed to be paired up with Air Force One. Why not go down that route? But in terms of getting this installed, when it comes to braking systems, this one really isn't too bad. I mean, it's going to take you some time. There's a little bit of wiring that goes into it, but as long as you stay focused, this is probably something you will be able to do. But with that said, why don't we go ahead, pull into the garage, and hook it up together now. To begin our installation here on our Escape, we're going to be first mounting up some of the major components. Now, obviously, we have the front end taken apart. and everything else, and that's because we're doing this the same time that we're installing our base plate and our other components, which I suggest doing because it makes it a lot easier. You got more space to work, but this can be done with all that put back together. Just take you a little more time. Well, first things first, we're going to get our main operating unit mounted up here inside the engine bay, right here in this area. Here's what our operating unit looks like mounted up. Not a whole lot of places to go with this one on this particular vehicle. And so what I've done is used a bracket to mount this up to an existing bolt in the frame there. It's gonna be really tricky to see, so I apologize. A lot of the stuff on this vehicle is kind of that way, so we're gonna do our best. But this is how it turned out. And if you take a look at it from the other side, you can kind of get a better idea on the bracket that I used and how this is secured. This is what it looks like on the other side. Like I said, I just used a piece of a bracket that I had laying around. But essentially, if you have a straight piece of steel that you can put a hole in and attach it to the factory bolt down there, and then attach your operating unit up here, that's going to be more than sufficient. This thing is very solid and not going to go anywhere. Now we can move to the front of our vehicle where we can mount up our air fitting and our breakaway switch. So pretty straightforward. The breakaway switch just gets bolted onto the base plate. A lot of times there will be a bracket there for you to use, which ours did. So just a nut and a bolt. Got that secured. Our air fitting, however, every setup's going to be a little bit different too, depending on your base plate and where you're trying to put these things. Our air fitting, I did have to use a no drill bracket that clamped around the base plate and then secured it to the bracket. So pretty straightforward. And then while we're right here, we might as well start to run our wires and everything up into the engine compartment. So you'll have two wires coming off of the breakaway switch, a black one and an orange one. And we're going to do our airline at the same time as well. So take your airline and you're going to want to cut this with a straight edge, like a tool like this, or a tubing cutter tool, or you can even put a block of wood down and take a utility knife and cut it straight. You want to avoid using regular pairs of snips because it'll kind of kink it and then potentially leak. So we just want a good, clean, straight cut like that one there. It's a really good example. And all of the air fittings that we're going to be plugging the line into, we're going to do the same with. They're going to work the same. So that's the fitting, and it's a quick connect fitting. So really easy. Just push it right into place. You'll feel it kind of lock in, and we know we're hooked up. So with that in mind, we got our orange and our black wire and our airline tube. That simply just runs along through here, continues up, and kind of goes behind our headlight, if you will, up into the engine compartment in this area. Here's where our orange and black wire come up. The black wire will get connected to one of the black wires coming out of our main operating unit. Doesn't matter which one, as long as you have it hooked up. And I secured it, or made that connection using a heat shrink butt connector, which I'll show you how to use in just a minute. The orange wire, what you're going to do is strip back the end of the insulation, and then you're going to take the additional brown wire that they give you on the kit and strip the insulation back on it and double it up in one end of the butt connector. The brown wire is going to run into inside of our vehicle, but we'll get to that in a minute. The other end, though, you're going to take the fuse holder. One end of the fuse holder, put on a ring terminal. Make sure the fuse is not installed. We're going to do that at the very end. And to make butt connections like this, you're just going to strip that back and give that wire a good twist, get it tight, place it into the butt connector, and crimp it down. And since I'm using the heat shrink type, I'll come back with my heat source and seal up the ends. Now we can hook this up to our power source, which there's a red cap here. Since the battery's in the trunk of this, obviously you don't really want to route your wire all the way back there, but there is a power stud right here. Let's just go down a little bit, so I source some extra nuts that fit the threads there, kind of stacked them up, that way we don't have to like chop into this plastic here to get our wires through there. So I'm gonna put the ring terminal over that, and then if you have any other power wires right now that you can hook up without, you know, hurting anything or anything along those lines, now would be a good time too. So this one's my charge line, which is all set up already, so that way we only have to do this once. But then we'll take a nut and simply tighten it down. As far as the airline goes that we ran up here, this ends up plugging into the main operating unit as well. And so that plugs into this fitting. It is labeled air in on the other side of our operating unit. Same, hooks up the same way we did it down at the front. Cut it clean, plug it right in. And then while you're right here, you're gonna have another black wire that comes out of the operating unit. Right, so two black wires come out of the operating unit. One goes to a breakaway switch, which we already hooked up. The other one's just gonna need to get grounded. And so right in the right here in this area, there's a bunch of factory grounds. You can use one of those. I use this one. Just pulled out the bolt with an 8mm socket, crimped on a ring terminal to our black wire, put the bolt through it, and tighten it back down. At this point, you can take the remaining length of your air tube here and cut it clean, plug that into the other fitting, the one below right here. That'll be labeled air out over on the side. And that will eventually run into the inside of our vehicle. But while we're right here, we'll finish up our operating unit. So since our vehicle has electric assisted brakes all the time, and our battery doesn't need to be disconnected, we're going to plug this vacuum port but leave this one open. And so what you can do, take the tube that they give you, you know, cut off a piece like this, a couple inches. They give you this plug. Put that plug in, and then this will just go over that air fitting there, and that'll block that off how they want it, and it'll leave that exhaust port open. So enough under the hood here. We're gonna go inside and inside of the vehicle and get some work done. So like I said, our airline tube that ran into the vehicle, as well as our brown wire that goes in the vehicle. Now obviously it'd be a good time too if you have any other wires that you need to run in or out, do it all at the same time. For example, our green wire here, this is for my brake light relay. So I did this all at the same time. It makes it a lot easier if you think things through like that. But it goes in through a grommet and through the firewall back here in this area. It's pretty hard to see from outside, but actually we can get a really good look at it from the inside. So let's move in there and check it out. So here on the driver's side, underneath the dash, along the firewall, this is where our wires and our tubing comes through. So there's a factory grommet. You can just pop that out if you want, just kind of pry it out with a screwdriver and cut a hole in it. And pop it back in and push the wires on through. So now that we know where our wires came through, we can get everything else hooked up. And you want to start with the actuator cylinder. At least that's what I started with. And I clamped this to the brake pedal arm. And there's going to be a cable that comes off of it. And you're kind of limited on where you can do this. Everything's just so tight. But there's an anchor, this piece. And if you look, there's this metal bracket kind of that comes down, and I use a self-tapping screw to secure it to that. And that gives us a good straight shot with our cable, because that's how we want it to be set up. There is a set screw in that anchor that you can use to adjust the tension of the cable, and you can tighten that down with a 4mm Allen key. But what you're looking for is when the brake pedal's just sitting here like normal, you want it to have a little bit of travel in it, you know, be able to move it back and forth just a little bit like that. That way it'll have the appropriate tension on it. From there, so we ran our air line in, and that air line simply just gets pushed into the actuator cylinder, just like how we connected the other ones. You know, good clean cut, and push it right in. There is going to be a wire that comes off the cylinder. This is known as the reed switch. It starts as one thick wire, but at the end of it breaks off into two, and I routed that over towards the outside of our vehicle where we can get it hooked up eventually, and figure out a spot and hook up our wireless transmitter. For our wireless transmitter, I simply just zip tied this to this wiring here. And if you happen to have the kit that just has the indicator light, it's going to be hooked up essentially the same way. You'll just run your indicator light up to your mirror, rear view mirror. But in our case, the transmitter is going to have two wires coming off of it, a red one, and that's going to get butt connected to the blue wire from the reed switch. The violet or brown colored wire coming from the reed switch, that's going to get connected to that brown wire, that extra brown wire that we ran inside, that tied into our fuse holder in the engine compartment. And then you're going to have a white wire on the transmitter as well, and that's just going to be a ground wire. So you could ground that anywhere to the chassis, clean metal. What I did, I had another wire I ran in, butt connected to that, and then grounded it in the engine compartment where we grounded the wire for our main operating unit. Now back in the engine compartment, all we have left to do is take our fuse, place that into the holder, and then we can hook up to our motorhome and make sure everything works. There is one thing that we're going to need to do in our motorhome, and that is plug in our wireless coach link. So really straightforward here, as long as you have a 12-volt outlet, kind of your standard deal there. That just plugs right in, and that's it. You don't have to worry about this, you know, connecting this to the system or anything along those lines. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Demco Air Force One supplemental braking system with motorhomes that have the factory BrakeSync on our 2022 Ford Escape.